Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Thank you guys so much for joining us here, and welcome back to another episode. So glad that you're here joining us wherever in the world you're listening to us from, whatever platform you're listening to us on. As always, thank you guys so much for the support, the kind messages, tweets, emails, all that great stuff that you've sent the show's way. Really can't believe that we're almost here on year 4, and thank you guys for being a part of that journey, whether you just started or whether you've been there with us since the beginning. Really do appreciate you tuning in, and this is going to be a fun episode because we get to really get into the mental side of basketball. I've had so many great conversations about X's and O's and culture and all sorts of aspects over these 200 plus episodes. But I really like to be able to have this conversation because it incorporates a couple different things, talking about the aspect of psychology, the aspect of how group dynamics work, and how all of those things kind of factor into a program buy-in, a team coming together, and a team functioning at its highest level. So really excited for this one, and hopefully you are too, to get into that mental dynamic of the game. Also excited that my guest is part of a coaching staff who I have interviewed a member of that coaching staff before. So I have interviewed Coach Jolie Carswell in late January, who is in Fort Scott Community College. And I'm also happy to be joined today by a member of her staff. Coach Caleb Tipton is here joining us today. Coach, really appreciate you coming on here and talking to us tonight. How are things going?
Things are going great. Thank you so much for having me. And, I really am looking forward to the opportunity to talk basketball. Not many better things to talk about.
Absolutely. 100% agree. Let's start with you, Coach. Where's this great game of basketball taking you? Where's your coaching journey taking you? And how did you ultimately end up here at Fort Scott Community?
That's a good question. I think the journey is everything. And, I've been able to live and to coach basketball in a couple different states. Originally, I was born down south, and then I grew up in New England, and now I'm coaching here in the Midwest. So the journey is awesome, getting to meet so many people, travel, and, have lifelong friends and coaches, and having the opportunity to learn. It's a really great thing. For me, I knew I wanted to coach whenever I went to my first ever varsity basketball game. I was in 8th grade living in New Hampshire, and, we had a smaller high school, but I went to the game, packed house. Everyone was there, tight, standing room only. Coaches were wearing suits, yelling at kids. It looked so intense. And it was that's whenever I decided that I wanted to be a coach whenever I got older. I always grew up playing 3 sports. I loved sports. And, to be able to make a living coaching is just a dream come true. Um, from 8th grade, most kids are focused on playing sports. And from then I was already dissecting, what my coaches were doing and how that would help me be a better coach. So I really got in at a young age, as soon as I could. I started coaching, second graders, teaching them how to dribble, teaching them the basics. And I think that that's a good background for a lot of coaches to have. I know sometimes in college coaching, you get kids that were really great college players, and then they transition to coaching and they immediately start coaching at, the college or high school level. But I think having that youth background and experience definitely helps because you're really breaking the game down.
Yeah.
And then from there, I just, saw the opportunity to keep growing, started coaching middle school, AAU, got into high school, and, now having the opportunity to be in college. I was a student assistant coach in college as well. And that was a great experience, so I really started, wiping sweat off the floor and being a student of the game. And to now have the opportunity to, be coaching in college, it's a dream come true. And, hopefully I'll get the opportunity to keep learning and keep moving up the coaching ladder and keep impacting lives along the way.
And I love what you kind of mentioned about being able to, start coaching with such a young age group where, like you mentioned, you're really breaking down the game. And I'm curious, are there even aspects of that coaching experience that you can even draw from at where it is that you're at now at the college level?
Oh, definitely. And one thing that I tell players all the time that I coach now that I'm at a higher level is
Hmm.
one of my favorite groups that I ever got to coach was the first team that I got to coach. I was 17 years old and I got the chance to coach a fourth and fifth grade rec team. And to this day, those kids play harder than any other team I ever coached. I uh, I had those kids taking charges and everything, and they were so bought in, and it was fun. And I remember, refs would come to me. It would take them a second to realize that at that level, fourth and fifth grade, that they were intentionally trying to take a charge. But once they picked up on it, it was a comical thing. So I tell my kids now, if I can get fourth graders to take charges, you're 19, 20 years old, like get on the floor, sacrifice your body. So it's fun. It's funny in that aspect, but it's been a process. And I think one thing that I've learned too throughout coaching at the youth level is the importance of support from the families, right? And the communities.
Hmm.
I've seen a lot of coaches, get good and bad reps from, how they are, perceived in the community. And, I've been thankful and been blessed to always, have players that want to be coached and parents that want their kid to be coached hard. So I've always been very thankful for that.
Yeah, it's that's funny. My first coaching experience, I was 17 years old, and I was coaching like sixth graders as well. And I don't know if I had them taking charges as much as I should have been as a senior in high school, but like, man, it's still something I vividly remember. I feel like in some ways I have more vivid memories from that coaching experience than even some of my previous years that I've had recently, just because there's just so much happening, and I learned so much from it and reflect so much about it that it's that's great though. Getting charges in fourth grade though, that's awesome. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
they were
proud of
very
it.
bought in. They were they were
Yeah,
very bought
they
in, and
have
I
to
think at
be.
that age. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I said you better be a fourth grade. You have to have a lot of buy-in if you're gonna be taking charges and everything at that level. Fourth grade.
Yeah, they don't understand the word, no, and at that age, they really don't understand, what failure is necessarily. So
Hmm.
it's definitely a way different type of, coaching environment. And obviously, you're looking to make it, more fun and, you want to teach them life lessons along the way.
Hmm.
But it's definitely a way different approach.
That's funny. Coach, let me ask you X's and O's. And I know I had a conversation also with Coach Carswell about this as well, but I want to give you an opportunity to talk about X's and O's. Let me ask you about things that you're passionate about, X's and O's wise. Where do you kind of fit in terms of what your input is in terms of how things are run or how uh, things are run schematically on an X's and O's side? What sort of things do you like and are passionate about offensively and defensively?
And that's a great question, and it's one of my favorite questions to answer. And I always throw people for a loop. Hey, are you an offensive coach or are you a defensive coach? The answer is neither. I'm a rebounding coach. That's one thing that happens on both sides of the court, and that's very important. I'm also very big into numbers and statistics. Numbers are very important, and generally, if you are able to see team statistics, you can be a very good defensive team and still be at the bottom of the conference. But there's one stat that really stands out, and that's the rebounding margin. Generally, if you have one of the worst rebounding margins, you're going to have one of the worst records.
Mm.
So to me, rebounding is very important. Every possession begins, and ends with a rebound. Um, but defensively, I like to be able to mix it up. Like I talked about earlier about living in different parts of the country, the game's played a little bit differently.
Yeah.
In New England, you're more likely to see a lot more sets being run, a lot of zones. In places that don't have shot clocks, they're gonna milk the clock. I've seen some 15 to 13, score games.
Oh, oh
That's just
boy.
how the style is. Uh,
Yeah,
it's
that's
tough
rough.
to watch, but
Yeah.
and I'm a big believer for the shot clock, because of that. But
Yeah.
not all high schools are able to implement that, unfortunately. But man to man is great. If I have a team, I would love to defensively press all game, not all game, but for majority of the game and be able to be into man as well. I've been able to work on multiple different staffs, and I think that that's a great thing. Also, between when I was in high school and college, I had 6 different coaches in 8 years. So
Oh,
being
that's
able to
ooh,
pick their brain
that's a
and
lot. Yeah.
It is, and, different situations happened and, just ended up in
Hmm.
different coaches.
Sure.
But being able to learn and to have so many different drills and practice plans, it was a blessing for someone who was really interested at an early age on, what works and what doesn't work. What do I like and not like? Steal some drills from people and not. But, um, man to man's the way to go. I'm not a fan of pack line. Personally, I call it whack line. And it's just from my experience, there's coaches that as long as you get your kids playing hard, whatever you run, it can be successful. Whether it's a
Hmm.
2-3 zone or a 1-3-1. But to me, I think pack line, you have to have guys that are really good at closing out. If not, then that defense isn't going to be successful. And especially now where teams are jacking up threes at a higher rate than ever before.
Yeah, a lot of
That's
shooters on the court too. Well, maybe
exactly.
shooter. I don't know. People who will shoot. Well, maybe they'll make them too. But yeah, no, I know what
Yeah,
you mean.
there's takers and there's makers.
Yeah,
Anyone can
yeah,
be a
yeah.
taker. But so I just think pack line really doesn't work out if your kids aren't bought in and they're not closing out hard. So I'm a man to man, no middle guy. And offensively too, like I said, New England, you're running a lot of sets. Since I've been here in the Midwest, I'm definitely more of a transition coach now. Because a transition can be any type of defense. If you can get the ball down the court, you can beat a zone. You can beat, a man and get a quick open shot and knock it down. So my philosophy has definitely changed over the years, and now I'm
Hmm.
using sets more in ATO situations or, if I
Yeah.
really need a bucket late game. But offensively, I like to run, be fast, and defensively, I like the man-to-man, no middle, and being able to run different zones.
I know you bring up a great point though that regionally the game does look a lot different. Even I grew up in Illinois, and I think of the way that the game was played, and this was 15 years ago. But comparing that and how I still feel it's kind of played in the Midwest, you got to where I am now in Arizona, it is different. We have the shot clock now here in Arizona, which has definitely changed the way things are. But for sure, like you go in these different parts and you just kind of see the way the game's changed. And for you, allows you to kind of pick up just on regional things, but then, like you mentioned, all the coaches that you worked on, you kind of can take everything from everywhere and from everyone, sort of thing. Um, I'm gonna ask you because you're a rebounding person before we get in this topic about what do you like to do to uh, drill or practice or improve rebounding? Is there a secret sauce to it, so to speak? What goes into getting a great rebounder, a great rebounding team?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it doesn't always work out the way you plan sometimes.
No.
But with that being said, I always paint the picture to my teams that we need to be good at the things that it doesn't take a good basketball player to be good at. I can take rebounding is a want thing, right? Rebounding is I'm gonna go get the ball thing. I use the example. I can take anyone out of the hallway in a high school and teach them how to box out. Um, Communicating on defense, right? Things like that. You don't have to be a good basketball player to be able to talk, right? Anyone can talk.
Hmm.
So to me, it's all about how you paint the picture and why it's important. I've seen a lot of games lost when you are the superior team to giving up second chance points.
Oh,
That's
sure.
one way that a team that might not be as skilled as your team can come back in a game and beat you. Giving them the opportunity to get second chance points. But I think with practices, you need to make them more intense than the games. There's certain drills and stuff you can do, and maybe you can do drills where, you don't call fouls. And, it toughens the kids up. It makes them really want the basketball and value the basketball. Um, maybe you can do a drill. I've seen coaches do drills where the ball goes out of bounds, but the kids are still fighting for the ball.
Yeah, yep, yep, definitely. I know exactly what you're
Encourage
talking
that.
about. No outs.
Encourage
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
As long as we're not, punching each other in the face and it, doesn't turn to a scuffle,
MMA
encourage that
fight. Yeah.
stuff. And if I have a team that I think is, playing a little on the soft side, I got this good drill where you put the ball right in the middle of the half court circle right there. You have one person on the outside, one on the inside, and they got 5 seconds to stop them from touching the basketball. And
Hmm.
you can do whatever you got to do to stop them from touching that basketball. Most of the time, it turns into jersey pulling and them grabbing each other. But they have a fun time with that drill. And it really, you want to talk about an intense practice and an intense drill. That's one that'll make your team want the basketball.
I like that a lot. And I also like the, what you mentioned about, I think sometimes as coaches, and I'm one of them, like who can maybe try and dress things up and complicate things with terminology or make in some ways the game seem so much more intricate and complicated and complex than it is. But, some of these things like you mentioned about rebounding and others and communication, these are just skills that, you know, players can you could teach it to them, but that idea of bringing that will out, or just kind of explaining like, hey, you don't need a lot of basketball skill to communicate or talk, maybe teach you a little bit on what to say, but just the act of speaking itself is not something that you need to have this crazy amount of skill to do. And I think that is hopefully something that might be encouraging to coaches who might have teams that are not as skilled, that they can focus on the things, which is a lot of basketball elements that don't require, high levels of understanding of the game.
Definitely,
Yeah.
100%, and that's what I say. In order to be successful, you got to be good at the things that it doesn't take being a good basketball player to be good at,
Hmm.
and then the rest will fall into place.
I like that. All right, coach, let's get into some psychology here. This is something you're passionate about. So let's talk about the psychology aspect of a team buying into the vision of the program, the culture, buying into each other. What goes into getting a team to click and really buy in and play for each other?
And it's very situational, and there's a lot that goes into it. I could probably talk, for 24 hours about different scenarios and different ways to go about it. I had a football coach that I played for, and he was an older gentleman. He was scary. He didn't yell much, but when he talked, you listened. He kind of looked like Stone Cold Steve Austin. Very intimidating. But he would always say, trust is the second most important word in the dictionary in the Bible. And on our shirts, we had the word trust big on our backs, and there was a chain link around the word trust, and it was tight. And he would always talk about the importance of that word and how we can't have any issues in our chain, right? If that chain gets broken, we got problems. And there's so many pieces that surround that word, but it's together and it's in a circle and it's strong, right? So I always love that visualization, and you know, the way he would talk about it really always bought me in. So I always try to carry that down. One thing that I will say about having kids bought in, I think if you have a good reputation as a coach, that definitely helps.
Yep.
That first year, can be very difficult. I was very fortunate that, when I was in Maine, coaching AAU and then coaching high school basketball, that my first year in the community, I had a very talented team and we went 24-2. So right once I was coaching in that community, that helped my reputation. So kids were already more likely to want to play for me and to want to be bought in and do things that we were doing that made us successful. Um, and that really opened the door for me in a lot of different ways and getting to coach a bunch of different teams and to, you know, really get known as a pretty good high school coach and a good trainer. So having a good reputation is very important. Um, winning at the end of the day, winning helps a lot. And I think it's important to align team goals. If you
Okay.
want to talk about strategy and buy-in, one thing that I always do is I always have individual meetings with players, always, at the
Okay.
beginning of the season and once a week. And in the beginning of the season, that first meeting is very important. Um, I talk to the kids about two things really. I talk to them about what's their individual goals and what's their team goals. And 9 out of 10 times when you talk about team goals, they always say, I want to win championship or I want to go undefeated. 9 out of 10 times it's going to happen. So now it's okay. How are we going to get there, guys? As individuals, you all told me, hey, we want to win a championship. Now I'm going to show you how to get there. But we got to do things. And I think practicing for perfection is important. If we're not doing a drill right, I can make kids do the same drill for a long time until we get it perfect. If not, we're running. And normally that helps build the skill and build what I want and set the standard. Setting the standard's important. Um, and if you say something as a coach, you got to stand by it and you got to do it. I've
Yeah.
seen coaches that maybe promise kids, hey, I'm going to get you more run next game or stuff like that. And then they don't end up doing it. If you ever
Uh-oh.
do that to a
You're
kid,
gonna
you
lose
lose
that
them.
kid. Yep.
Yes. And then that's they're done. And then that, really eats up the rest of the team. Right. So another thing too, I try to focus on is paying attention to the back half of your lineup. I think is very important, especially for teams that are later in the season and making runs. You got to hold everyone accountable, and you can't have favorites. You got to be fair and you got to be tough. But I see a lot of times the kids that may not play as much near the end of the season, they get really, upset with their lack of playing time, and it leaks
Hmm.
into the rest of the team, and it can cause a cancerous attitude. But I think having those individual meetings really helps a lot with that. So you can help track progress with their individual goals and how they're working towards it. But having conversations and having communication with everybody, and being hard on everybody and being fair is extremely important.
And I think what you said, maybe in theory, can sound, oh, pretty simple, but that is definitely a time commitment. I can't imagine the amount of time that could go into those conversations. I don't know if you have a schedule how much time it takes, but to do that every single week is a huge investment of time. And I think that, if a coach, hears this and is like, oh, it sounds like a great idea, I should do that. Like, just be prepared that if you want to commit to that and really do that, you really got to be all in yourself as a coach and make sure that you're intentional with your planning of it.
Oh, 100%. And I think psychologically, really the
Hmm.
biggest picture that I try to paint for the kids is that they know that I'm dedicated when it comes to coaching basketball, and they know that I'm willing to do whatever it takes in order to be successful at coaching basketball. And you want them to learn that if they are, as bought in and they work as hard as, they do towards becoming better basketball players, and, they see how I coach, hopefully that will carry on with them in life. Right. So, if they want to go be a doctor and go be a lawyer, how do you go about being the best doctor and lawyer that you can possibly be? So I think that that's really the important thing that, overall that you want to teach kids, and to
Hmm.
be confident and to believe in yourself. But
So,
like you said, I'm sorry.
no, no, I was just going to ask as I'm thinking about this now. When you're having these conversations, these individual conversations with players, every player is just different on a human level, and they're different as people. So, in your experience in doing this, have you had to personally kind of adjust the way that you approach each conversation, and because some kids are maybe a little less willing to open up, some are a little bit more willing to open up. I imagine just who you have to be, obviously still being authentic and still being yourself, though you have to be kind of flexible with the way that maybe you build those relationships, knowing that every person on a human level is just a bit different.
Oh, definitely. And you really have to, have a good understanding of the individual. Not every kid, has dreams of going to the NBA. Some kids just love the game and love being a part of something. And there's nothing wrong with that at all, right? But, when it comes to the standard and, what the team needs from everybody, that's one thing that I think as a coach you can't budge on. Hey, you signed up to be, on this team, even if your role is not playing very much, and you spend a lot of time on the bench, right? Your voice better be, very raspy after the game. Your
Yeah.
hands should be raw because you're clapping so much. You
Hmm.
know, but yeah, what position can you put them in and have them bought into their role that's going to help the team be successful? And it's definitely not all kids are. I always had great relationships with my coaches, and I had great coaches, and you know, not all kids are like that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it definitely takes time with some kids building that relationship, and others
Yeah.
it's pretty easy.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's great. Just the concept of group dynamics, I just kind of talked about the idea of everybody's kind of their own person, and you're going to get teams, I'm sure, that will click right together and then they gel and they're friends. You're going to have others that process of bringing that group and bringing that team together is a bit tricky. So I wanted to give you kind of the platform to talk a little bit about what are some things that maybe our listeners might not really know about, group behavior, group dynamics that maybe can help coaches out kind of understanding the way that like groups form and kind of come together.
And that's a great question. I started coaching basketball when I was 16, and now I'm 20. I'm 27, about to be
Mhm.
28, and there was one year between there that I didn't coach basketball. I graduated college, and I had wanted to uh, use my business degree that I got, and I ended up becoming a manager at a Walgreens in that year. And the one thing that I learned there was, even though I wasn't coaching basketball, I still had a team to lead. And a lot of those lessons that I learned are still the same in coaching. The idea is the same, because there's statistics and numbers, when it comes to tracking, how successful your store is, right, that you're running.
Hmm.
So trying to line up everyone's goals, hey, individually, what's your goal, as an employee? Oh, do you want a pay raise? You want a promotion? How do we get you there? Right? That's no different than, a basketball player trying to get more playing time and trying to be a better player. Right. And then having the store goals, like team goals win a championship. Store goals have, 90%, customer satisfaction. Right. So these are things that we strive for individually, but also as a team. So I think that I learned valuable lessons in having that opportunity and having that experience, especially, being, 22, 23 years old, trying to, manage a pharmacy retail store. All my employees were older and, I'm sure looked at me all different ways sometimes. But at the end of the day, I would say I was successful in that position. And I apply those same concepts to coaching basketball. And I think that that's important. So, aligning the team goals, uh, what are we going to do and how are we going to get there? The we over me mentality,
Yeah.
right? In basketball, I never liked the players that we would win a game and they're upset because they only scored 4 points. To me, that's crap.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
would much rather, if I could win a game and not shoot the ball once, I'm taking the win. That's
Yeah.
just how my attitude is and how it always was. So,
Yeah.
really trying to, better everyone.
Yeah, no, I was thinking of, instances where I've seen where, we've been fortunate enough to get some wins and the player from the opposing team that lost just like rushes to the score table to see how it is that they did. And I was like, ooh, that makes me feel a little icky there. Like, I don't know what the culture, what's going on with that program when a player's doing that sort of thing. I don't want that at all in my team.
Definitely not.
No,
And,
no.
and that comes into teaching life lessons as well as teaching basketball.
Yeah.
You want good character. You want your kids to have good character because I coach kids to, help them be the best version of themselves. Not every kid's going to the NBA, but how can they be the best in their community once their playing careers all said and done?
Hmm.
So, sometimes you're going to have hard conversations with kids, but if you really care, those hard conversations need to be had.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to ask about, how in your experience of coaching, when programs get when groups, I guess, and programs, when groups kind of get tested, when there's adversity, whether it's practice, games, just the grind of a long season, and things get a little tough and things get a little difficult. What do you attribute to, your the groups that you've worked with kind of sticking together and kind of handling that adversity versus kind of like turning in on each other? What kind of allows, in your opinion, those groups to kind of make sure that they stay strong through those, adverse situations that are always going to come up during a season?
And you're right about that. I have seen, in my years of basketball, I have seen so many different situations come up, whether it be an injury bug, you have 13 kids, now you have six, whether it be, kids wanting to quit because of their playing time. Um, I think
Yeah.
one thing that's very important is understanding that, you're only as good as your weakest link. And, that's how I approach coaching. And not only that, trying to find out who your leaders are early, I think is very important as a coach. Your leaders might not always be your best players, but the one guy that the other guys can get around and they get behind and they follow, right? It's very important to have a good relationship with that player because a lot of times maybe they don't always need to hear everything from me. If I can get the coaches or the players to coach themselves, that's the best because I really think that player led led teams end up being the most successful.
Hmm.
If I'm the coach, it's important for me to be consistent every day, right? The kids got to know what to expect from me, and that's very important. But if you can get the players to start getting the other players bought in, I think that's what makes it more effective. And with those individual meetings, making time out to do that. I think when I was coaching high school, it was also easier to build these relationships because I was also teaching at that high school.
Yeah.
So,
That's true.
a lot of the times, these kids, they can't get away from me whether they want to or not, but being there for them, taking interest in things that, maybe they take interest in off the court, genuinely getting to know them. And then that makes these individual meetings and these hard conversations easier. And I've definitely had my fair share of, maybe there's one kid on the team that, the players might not uh, really care for, but that's still your family, and that's still your brother. Um, when times get tough and when we're battling, in a
Hmm.
game or during practice.
No, 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 great. Appreciate you sharing that for sure. And it kind of mentioned that question that I was going to kind of lead to also about for coaches themselves too. Of these relationships that we build with our players and try to, make sure that, our players are where we want them to be and that they're in a good place themselves. Sometimes, we hit this wall with some of our players where maybe there's, a difficult interaction we had at a practice or something that was said in a game or, a player's just frustrated and, they don't really want to talk things out. They're just kind of, stewing in it a little bit. What do you think coaches can kind of do to kind of overcome that, figurative wall when maybe there's just that, separation in that relationship and the relationship isn't as strong as maybe the coach or the player want it to be?
And that's another great question. Like I said, earlier about being consistent. I tell kids too. I'm never going to stop coaching you. No matter what.
Hmm.
Um, and being there for them, um, being able to, really try to see what's best for them, on and off the court. I think one thing I've also learned as a life lesson myself, no matter where I've lived and I've had the opportunity to, live in many different states and, meet so many different people. One thing that I've took away from that is that people sense when you're genuine. Um,
Yeah.
and that's one thing about me is if you know me personally, I'm very genuine. Like I really believe in what I do. I believe in myself and I'm very passionate about what I do. And that's very obvious in the way that I talk about things, especially when we're on the court. Um, so being a very genuine and caring person goes a long way. Um, and it does make these conversations, these difficult conversations, a lot easier. And sometimes if you have maybe like an individual that you're not getting through to, um, having and it's all situational, but having the team run for individual mistakes, because then now it's the kids getting on to you, not just it's your teammates getting on to you, not just coach, like, oh man, coach doesn't like me, coach is the worst, you know, um, having the team get onto them as well, but coming from a place of caring and understanding, in today's society, mental health, I think, is becoming a very important topic, and
Sure.
having an understanding of what kids are going through, and because sometimes maybe the issue isn't on the court, maybe the issue isn't even with you. So being able to understand and dissect those situations are very important. And also, as a coach, I want to save everybody, but
Yeah, yeah.
at the end of the day, you also got to have an understanding that structure and being able to save everybody is probably not going to happen.
Yeah, yeah, but like you said, right? You're never gonna stop coaching them. You're never gonna like, it's like you never give up on a person, right? You never give up on that person or on that player. But as you mentioned, sometimes there's, things don't, work out perfectly the way that you want them to do. And also, I'm sure you've had experiences too where you kind of have that wall or that what seems like that icy relationship with a player, but then. Whether it's the end of the year or just like, later down the road, all of a sudden, like that wall comes down and things are good because some players, they're coming from all these other backgrounds where they don't necessarily like have trust, or maybe they don't have, adults who they necessarily trust in their lives and they're very, very hesitant and very cautious before they kind of let themselves down. And I'm sure you've probably had all variety of experiences like that where maybe like one day, one year or something, it's like, oh, like we're good now. Like we kind of had that, breakthrough a little bit later, a lot later where, compared to somebody else where maybe it happened sooner.
Definitely, and being able to put yourself in their shoes or try to at least, definitely helps. There's definitely times looking back in my playing career that I disagreed with a coach and I didn't understand, why certain things were taking place. And now, I'm a
Hmm.
little older and I can still reflect on those situations. And now it's like, hey, that makes sense. So sometimes you do have situations like that, but um,
Yeah, no, no, definitely. Let me ask you about the concept of like leaders and it's such an interesting topic that I hear a lot in the high school coaching, circles as well about, team captains and whether or not there's any merit or any of that really matters. If everyone can be, a leader or a captain and everyone's kind of has ownership or, there's other coaches who have the mentality of like, oh no, you want to have your leaders or have your leaders who are going to lead your guys or your girls. What's your kind of take on that idea of team leaders or your captains like that? Is that something you personally have kind of believed in coaching wise?
Definitely, and I like to establish one, as early as possible.
Hmm.
It may not always be the most skilled kid, but it's the kid that you can rely on and you have a great relationship with, and you can communicate with, and you can trust that they're able to uh, do the right things, and you hold them accountable. Like I want my leaders. Like let's say if an instance came up and I wasn't able to run practice, I want that leader to be someone that I could trust that could coach the practice. And I've definitely been thankful and lucky enough. I've had players like that I can trust in to be able to do stuff like that. So that's very important. Um,
What
but
was
also
the process, if you don't mind me asking, about kind of identifying like right away who those are? Do they kind of stand out right away? Do you have to feel like you got to bring it out in them? What goes into that?
When you're at an established program too, like let's say high school for an example, sometimes you can see it, younger in their careers, and then as they get older and get up to varsity,
Hmm.
you can see it, early, but normally the kid that plays the hardest, and does what you ask them to do, and is a good person off the court. I think that's important. That they're always doing the right thing, and from a psychology standpoint too, I think it's important for a coach to not only have a leader, but to be hard on your leader. Someone that wants to be coached and someone that embraces coaching. And the team from a psychology and group dynamic standpoint, if they see you, getting on to the leader or being tough on one of your better players, you know it paints that picture of accountability. Like kids know their role. They might not always admit it, but deep down, I think kids understand, their basketball abilities and where they line up. Um, so helping to paint a picture of that role. But if you're tough on your hardest player, um, it will help. And it's got to be a player that can take criticism. It's not always easy, but it definitely helps paint the whole picture of accountability.
And well, to that point about, sometimes it is, players who take criticism a certain way. I think that's also where those weekly meetings you talk about kind of come into play, where, if you feel like a player is getting frustrated or maybe they feel like, they're being, treated a certain way, kind of let them know, about, your expectations for them as like the leader and as the role model there, that they also are going to be the ones that are kind of treated and pushed the hardest, because then everybody else in the team knows, oh man, if this guy or this girl is clearly, our most talented player is, being held to this highest standard, then there's no excuse for the rest of us, sort of thing.
Oh, 100%, 100%. You nailed it. And also, too, in those individual meetings, don't be afraid as a coach to ask, how can I be a better coach for you? Like, what can I do? Because sometimes you got people that will tell you what they think you want to hear or tell you what, they think they should say. But, you really want those individual meetings to be a safe place and safe spot. And I think having that ability, when I'm coaching, I coach. Like, I'm locked in, I'm doing what I need to do as a coach. But off the court, you know, I'm very easygoing, and I like to laugh, joke, and have fun. Um, you know, I always pick on the kids I coach, and they always feel free to give it back. And I think being able to see each other in that light, when you're not always yelling and coaching, is great for the kids as well. Coach is a human, so that's good for them to see.
Sometimes it's surprising to our players to hear that, though, that we are human. We are human beings and everything. Now, the little caveat to that, and I certainly agree, though, is also as a coach, though, make sure, and it's hard, but if you're going to allow your players to suggestions or criticize or whatever, like as a coach, you got to listen, and you don't want to argue back. Listen to them and take in what it is that they're saying, because it may be something you really do need to hear, and it could be painful sometimes. I mean, maybe you can speak to it. Sometimes you hear some things that make you wince a little bit, but I think if you want to be a great coach, you gotta kind of take that ego away a little bit, even though it's hard.
Oh, definitely, and that's why I also enjoy talking with parents and having a good relationship with parents. That's very, very important, especially if you're at, the high school level. Um, because sometimes parents, they might not always know everything about basketball, but
Hmm.
they pick up on things and they have a certain perspective that, um, maybe it's refreshing to hear, and it's a way that maybe you didn't look at things, but it's like that outsider looking in type perspective. So
Yeah.
I always enjoy hearing that, especially from the parents that might not know a lot about basketball, but they can say, "Ooh, your kids are bought in. Like you guys are just like a way more together team." Comments like that go a long way.
Yeah, no, I love those. I love it, especially when it's like, especially from sometimes like parents or from some outsiders, people who just can only look at your program at like a quick glance, and maybe they're only around for, a game or a few minutes, but the fact that they can like pick up on it right away, it's like, man, if it stands out that easily in just a few minutes or at a quick glance, like you have to feel like you're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, 100%.
Uh,
Those are definitely the best.
so let me ask you about things that you think coaches can do to intentionally bring a positive atmosphere to their program and in that positive state of mind. What would you recommend coaches are intentionally planning, intentionally scheduling, intentionally doing to make sure that things are staying positive and things are staying on the right track?
Awesome question. And I'm a big believer in the power of positivity. I'm a big believer in the energy that like you may give off as a coach. If you're a nervous coach, if you're unsure of yourself, your kids are going to be a little nervous in crunch time. But there's a lot that you can do to build positivity. If I'm gonna get onto a kid, let's say I got a kid who isn't working hard on defense or something like that. I will talk with them a lot about the things that they are good at, and then hit them with the but hey, we got to work a little harder on defense, because it's not easy. People don't like hearing what they're not good at, and that's just a human nature thing. It's not always easy, depending on the kid and the situation, but you know as a coach too, it's your job to put them in situations to be successful. So if I have a kid who can shoot but can't really do much else, I'm probably not going to have him be the one bringing the ball up the court, right?
Mm,
um, so teaching kids confidence, teaching them to believe in themselves, and being positive, I think there's a lot that you can do in practices and in games. I'm a big believer in psychology. Like, how are we going to win a game and maybe punk out the other team before the game even starts? I'm big on
yeah,
energy
yeah, yeah.
and having loud warm-ups, and I've seen this at every level. The team that, they're hooting and hollering and, they're having fun and, they're flying around during warm-ups and, the other team's just kind of lazily doing layups. Um, Normally that team, they're going to come out and punch you in the mouth. So I'm big on that and how we bring energy in practice. I'm big on clapping and noise being made of some sort. I like loud practices. To me, a loud practice is a good practice. I want to be
Hmm.
able to walk into a school and, the gym's on the other side of the floor, but I can hear a good practice, you know? Um,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
so stuff like that. And then I think too, psychologically, I'm a big believer in the team huddle before free throws or during free throws. Just check in with each other real quick. Free throw goes up, okay, whether they're on the defensive side or the offensive side, just huddle up real quick, just touch base, just talk about it, calm each other down, be there for each other. That to me is definitely the most underlooked part of basketball. And I
I
think
like that.
teams that do stuff like that generally are more successful. Um, there's a lot that goes into that, so I make sure that they huddle up in situations like that. And it's just maybe sometimes it's a quick, hey, let's try this next time, or just, hey, you're doing great. It's okay that you had that turnover. We'll get it back. But say something positive to each other. I think that little thing goes a long way.
It sounds like for you too, as a coach, like you're always, it seems, have, as you kind of talked about, that positivity on the front of your mind, and I imagine players have to get a sense of, comfort or get a sense of a confidence about that when they know that, their coach is upbeat, their coach is bringing energy, that there's an excitement level there, because I'm sure you've seen it too, where, you can see kind of the programs or see the teams that, hit that panic button, and then the coaches look panicked and they look frazzled or they're upset. And then, the body language gets really bad. And it sounds like to me, like your players definitely can kind of feed off that, confidence and positivity that you exude, and know that, like, coach isn't ever going to kind of lose the plot or lose his way, so to speak.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it goes into that buy-in and that trust, especially late game situations.
Hmm.
My kids know that, I'm going to put us in the best situation to be successful. And I've been fortunate enough to have such great kids that I've got to coach that, they've always been bought in, and, they've always, had faith and have always believed. And that's so important. And, the families and how they're raised, I've always, for the most part, I've always had coached kids that come from great families. Don't overlook that, because we talk about being a good human and how that relates to being a good basketball player. If you can handle stuff off the court, stuff on the court will take care of itself sometimes.
Yeah, no,
Um, so
for
being
for
very
sure,
thankful.
for sure. That's awesome. Your the practices that you run or help run, how much of this intentional, like making sure that there's a lot of like group work, making sure that there's a lot of time for players to be, communicating, working together, building on those team skills. Is that a something that needs to intentionally be planned, or is that just kind of a byproduct of all the other stuff that you just happen to be working on in a practice?
You know what? With how passionate I am, I spend a lot of time, with psychology, right? Thinking about
Hmm.
what I'm going to do the next practice, right? Practice ends, and I'm already thinking about, okay, can we do this? Can we do that? Is there certain drills we can do? If certain kids have, beef with each other, I'm going to pair them up in a drill where they have to talk to each other and work together, right? Stuff like that. But oh, I apologize. I forgot where I was going with that. But stuff like
Yeah, well, like, go ahead.
oh, sorry, stuff like like if a player takes a charge, help that player up. I'm big on that. Stuff like that. So like if I don't have everyone rushing, to that player, we're gonna start running. Um, and stuff like that because kids don't like running. If we
No.
can't go, if we don't huddle during a free throw, right, we're going to run for that. But I think the biggest thing is, if a player hits the ground, and some coaches really emphasize that, especially in a game, go get your teammate. That's your teammate, that's your brother. If not, we're running for that. I think that that's a very important aspect too, and things that you can do in practice to help build that.
I like that idea of kind of like whole team, consequences, positive or otherwise, because I've been through experiences as a coach where I can even have felt that I've almost like personally like ostracized a player or just got on a player and didn't really have the whole team be a part of whatever that discussion was and just kind of singled on that one player. And man, I just think of some of those instances, where I'm just, ripping into a player for, this, that, or whatever. And I just feel, I can almost feel that player slipping away from me because I could tell that it's just like, oh, like, they're shut down, they're done. And, then the team doesn't really understand, how they're all a part of that because I'm just on this one player. And so like that intentional of like, everything affects everyone sort of thing, like I think it probably has to. And I mean, I know this, like it definitely creates a healthier program and a healthier team when it's everyone, as one.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah,
We win as a team, we lose as a team,
I
and
like
I
that.
think that
Yeah.
that's the big picture. You don't lose a game because Johnny missed the last second shot at the buzzer. You don't lose a game because of that. No, there's everything that went into it. If you're a kid that maybe didn't play much and your energy was horrible on the bench, you're going to hear it from me too. Like
Hmm.
we're all accountable and we're all in this together. And at the end of the day, no matter what our role is, did everyone do the best that they could do and give their best individual performance? I think that that's extremely important.
Yeah, no, I no, definitely. Awesome. No, that's really, really good. I wanted to ask about a couple more things here as I'm trying to formulate a couple questions here related to some program buy-in. Are there at the college level, when you think about players that are recruitable, players that are you're gonna bring into the college level, are you able to kind of like even get that sense about, oh, I think this guy or this girl is definitely going to be a team player. I can tell that this person has the we before me mentality. Can those things kind of be picked up on a recruiting level?
And that's a good question. Sometimes that's tough to answer because, you might not know who you're truly getting as a recruit until, they show up for practice day one for you at your, college level.
Mm,
And also too, I think that there's, psychologically, I think that there's differences in the level of college at which you're coaching at. JUCO is very different than, Division 2 basketball or Division 3 basketball. Um, but one piece of advice that I got from a D1 women's coach that I had the chance to pick her brain for a little bit, she said a good recruiting tip that she does is she talks to opposing coaches about that player.
ooh,
And
that's
I
interesting.
thought that, yeah, I thought that was very interesting. But the point that she made is that no one's going to give you a realer intake on what that player is like than the opposing coach.
Mm,
And for me, like that really kind of changed my perspective on things. And that's definitely something that I look into doing more now. If I get the opportunity to, some coaches may just never get back to you. Why is this guy asking me about player from a different team? But most of the time when you do get a response, it's, oh man, coach, that girl's a killer. You definitely are
yeah,
going to
yeah.
wonder, she's a great teammate. But the other coach, is going to see things that other people don't always see.
And the reason I ask that is because, I that it's just one of those things that anything that I think a high school player can do to kind of stand out or separate themselves. Of course, they all have their, their huddle and their mixtape and all these other things, their highlight tape and all these other stuff. Maybe a mixtape too, actually. But, just those little things about whether or not they're, somebody who's going to fit in a program, right? Because you could speak to that, you're trying to find players that fit into your culture and what it is that you're trying to do, and that if a coach can sense that, okay, this person's somebody who I can bring right into the fold and they're going to be bought in and ready to go, that could be a huge difference compared to somebody who they might be a little unsure about that on.
100%. And I tell kids all the time, everyone looks good in a highlight tape. That's why it's a highlight tape. But coaches at the next level, we want to see game film, full game film. And I'm paying more attention to how they are on the bench, how they are treating their teammates, how are they in warmups.
Hmm.
To me, that stuff goes a long ways. And I've heard stories of coaches that are really higher up at the next level, and they really focus on that stuff as well. Because I think deep down as coaches, we believe that we can teach you the skills right on the court to be successful. I believe in
Yeah.
me as a coach. Like I can work with you on your jumper. I can teach you how to become a better defender, right? But some things, as far as being a good person, um, and how they are when they treat people, some of that stuff is instilled from how they were brought up in their environment, and you can't always win those battles as a
Yeah.
coach.
Yeah. And that's and with the landscape of the way college recruiting is right now, if there's that, if you feel like you're going to have to fight, to get a player to be bought in, and you're going to have to, put all this energy and time, so for some coaches, like, I just don't have the time maybe to invest in that, like others would, and they'll move on to somebody else. And it's kind of tough. And it's kind of, unfortunate, but that just kind of reaffirms to me, everything that I say we as, me as a high school coach and high school coaches, to make sure that we're doing these things at the high school level, at the younger level, these meetings, and these intentional ways to like bring groups and bring teams together. Because yeah, never know who might be watching a player, and who might be looking at a player, and just I think it's a great practice for teenagers, right? To have those meetings, and make sure they're part of a positive group dynamic. But yeah, especially on the recruiting method, for coaches to know, like, oh, this person came from a program with a lot of positive culture, and they came in a good group dynamic, and this is the type of person, or the type of person we're looking for. At least that's what I would
Definitely. And
hope so.
teaching kids to have their own voice, very important too. Like
Yeah.
when you do these individual meetings, if they can't speak their mind to right, to me as a coach, someone who's there and is not going to judge you and is always going to be there for you no matter what, on and off the court. If you can't have tough conversations with me, the real world's going to be really tough whenever you're working a job and you have a family, right? So all these life lessons on and off the court, I try to make as many life lessons as I can, and I think
Mm.
that that's important to the kids as well.
Love it. No, that's phenomenal. It's really encouraging to hear. Let me ask you before we hit our concluding segment about ideas that you have for off season. You know, as this episode comes out, we'll be deep in the off season, maybe headed closely here into summer. What do you think is important to make sure that that time is being used well to kind of bring your team and bring groups together?
Obviously, communication and staying in touch with them, right? If you got a bunch of new players coming in, I'm going to be very big this year on, having conversations with them and checking in with them. How's your progress going? Obviously, sending them, workout plans and all that stuff. But as far as returning players go, you need to have that time to, right once the season ends, immediately give them, a week or two to collect their thoughts. But then, you need those conversations of, what went well, what didn't work well, how can we get you as a staff to where you need to be? How can we, make you better? Like, what are your goals? What are your thoughts? What are your feelings? Having these intense and, important conversations can really go a long way. But returners, how can we get you where you need to be? And newcomers, how can we get you, to the best of your ability? I've seen it a lot of times. If you don't check in on kids, you recruit a kid and then, they sit on the couch all summer and, eat potato chips. And then they show up and that's not the same kid that, you
What
thought you were
happened?
getting,
Yeah.
it does happen. Um, but checking in, very important. Conversations, communications, very important.
Yeah. You don't want to let a player go too long away from you, right? You want to make sure like, yeah, I'm still here, you know. Maybe we're not I don't see each other every day, but I haven't forgotten about you. And that's powerful too, right? Like for a player to still know like, hey, like I know that, my coach is still going to check in on me and make sure things are good and how I'm doing. Like they don't just care about me as a basketball player, when there's downtime and it's in the off season and maybe I have a little bit more free time, they're still going to just make sure everything's going well. And that means a lot to a player if it comes from a place of sincerity.
Definitely. I still got kids I coached, 5, 6 years ago, hey, they're getting that Merry Christmas text from me on Christmas.
Uh,
I had one reach out, to me the other day. They moved to a different state and they won their second high school championship back to back. And, as a
right.
coach, obviously it's great to hear from them. And it's like, hey man, like I hope all is well. Obviously that they know that you care about them more as a basketball player.
That's so cool. That's awesome. To wrap up, Coach, there's a couple questions that I ask every guest. Starting with this first one, which is thinking back on your coaching career. What is a moment from your coaching career that you went through and that you experienced that you think by sharing our listeners would be able to learn from?
Well, I believe I got into coaching, for the right reasons. For me, I was so blessed to have coaches that loved and cared about me as a person and helped make me the man that I am today. And, I've always wanted to be that for kids, if, they'll buy in and they'll give me the chance to help them out. And I've always felt like my biggest downfall as a coach is that sometimes I truly believe in the kids more than they believe in themselves. And as I mentioned earlier, I think one lesson that I think is important to learn is that, you're not going to be able to help every kid in every situation. I think not too long ago, there was a kid I knew and he played basketball hard. He played hard. And he was a good kid, easy to talk to, fun to coach at times. And I knew his home life, wasn't the best.
Hmm.
And he was a little rough around the edges. He was a football player trying out for basketball, definitely a football player. You could see it in him. But,
Yeah.
I gave him a shot, and I believed in him, and at the end of the day, it didn't work out. I still ended up having a good relationship with the kid. And we both decided that, it was right for us to go our separate ways, but I believed in him, gave him a shot and it didn't end negatively, but it just didn't work out. And at the end of the day, as much as you would love to, you can't help everybody. They got to want it as well.
Hmm. Yeah. And you know, it's I think it's tough because I almost think every coach kind of has that experience too. And unfortunately, I feel like even if you haven't yet, you might still have that experience, but it's almost I don't know I don't know, it kind of sounds maybe funny, but maybe in a way it's kind of reassuring or reaffirming that we kind of all go through this as coaches, right? We kind of all
Yeah.
have that experience eventually that you do. It's like, and to me, kind of what I learned is because I've had that experience as well, is like, hey, like this is something that could happen, or may will happen, but like you're not alone in it. And and maybe there's some comfort in that. I'm not too sure. I take some, though I think there's so many tough experiences that we go through as coaches, or things that we think like, man, does this only happen to me, or am I the only one who goes through this? And I think the answer is always no.
Definitely. There's a lot of
Yeah.
coaches out there.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, Coach, to wrap up, I give every guest what I call a 60-second soapbox, but I'm not going to time you. So don't worry if you go over 60 seconds, but it's your platform to get out kind of a final message, a final thought, a closing idea, anything that you have on your mind that you want to leave the listeners with, Coach. I'm going to go ahead and let you take the floor, and I'm going to go ahead and let you just take it from here.
Hey, thank you very much. And, as always, I really appreciate the opportunity and you having me on here. I thought it was funny at first. I read the questions and, we got ready for the podcast. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to talk for an hour. But here we are going over an hour. And it's been an awesome experience. So thank you to that.
Mhm.
But one thing that I think is important to me, and at different levels you coach at, you're going to have different numbers and statistics, but I'm very big on numbers and statistics, like I talked about earlier. Um, Use numbers to help make coaching decisions. Obviously at the college level, you can get really advanced statistics, but, you know, even though I love the kids I coach, and sometimes tough love is still love. When it comes to making decisions in game, I more so run that like a business. And also too, when we talk about these individual conversations, right? Um, Sometimes there's a kid, he's frustrated with his playing time, and maybe being able to be like, look, you're supposed to be my point guard, but you have a negative assist to turnover ratio, and having numbers and stats available can sometimes help kids understand what you're trying to do as a coach, and helps them understand the why and why you make certain decisions. As a point guard, your job is to take care of the basketball and to get others involved, right? So maybe I'm
Mhm.
having a conversation with a kid, hey, you got a negative assist to turnover ratio, so it's tough to play you in certain situations. And
Yeah.
that way it really helps paint the picture. And also too, I think as a coach, if you listen to the numbers, you won't be second guessing any decisions, because you can say as a coach, hey, we got a technical foul and I just put my best free throw shooter out there. That's the person that's shooting 90%, they're going to take those free throws. It takes If you run it like a business, it really takes a lot of it makes decisions easier, I would
Yeah.
say. So that's my biggest thing. Numbers are important, stats are important. If you get the chance to, have stats or do stats yourself as high school, as I'm sure a lot of the high school coaches are doing. I know I did it, rewatched a lot of games and took stats myself, to have those numbers. So it helps you make decisions, and it also helps paint the picture, for kids of why you make these decisions. And once they understand that, you'll get a lot less attitude and issues.
Awesome. That was great, Coach. I really like that you left off on that note, because I think that's something I may have needed to hear. So yeah, the way that you kind of broke that down, using that business analogy. No, that was great. I think I needed that. Coach, I really appreciate you coming on and having this great talk about psychology, mentality, group dynamics, buying in with programs. I mean, I love that this one's going to come out, off season for a lot of high school coaches who can maybe use this to, reinvigorate their programs, and make sure that, they're going into the summer and going the off season next year with their group bonds that much stronger. So, Coach, keep doing all the great stuff that you're doing. Excited to follow along on the Fort Scott journey, and thank you so much for your time. This was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. I hope you have a great night, and hopefully maybe we can do this again.
Love to. Thank you guys so much for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.